All right, so get ready because today we're going to take a deep dive into Bitcoin and government reserves.
Yeah.
We've got a lot of research and news on this, and it's pretty wild stuff.
Yeah, it's definitely fascinating.
Yeah. Have you ever wondered what happens when a president decides to treat Bitcoin like it's a strategic asset, just like oil or something?
Like a national strategic reserve.
Yeah, exactly, like a national strategic reserve.
Yeah.
Get ready for some big surprises because we're going to unpack this executive order that kind of shook up the entire financial world.
Well, what's interesting here is that you have like this image of the U.S. government, you know, kind of steeped in tradition, but then suddenly they make this move that screams like future of finance.
Right.
It's kind of like if your grandpa showed up to Thanksgiving in a spacesuit.
I love that analogy.
It's unexpected, but you have to kind of admire the boldness of it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, so for those who didn't hear about this, we're talking about former President Trump, who signed this executive order to establish a strategic Bitcoin reserve.
Yeah.
This isn't just like, dipping their toes in the crypto pool. This is like jumping in head first.
Cannonball.
Yeah, exactly. So what was the reasoning behind this?
Well, you got to imagine Bitcoin has been gaining a lot of momentum and institutional investors are starting to really get into it. And then on top of that, you have the global economy going kind of crazy with all this inflation and geopolitical uncertainty. So it's like everyone's looking for a safe place for their money, and some people are betting on Bitcoin.
So basically, in the middle of all this craziness, Trump saw Bitcoin as a way for the U.S. to kind of stay on top of the financial world.
Exactly. It wasn't just about getting on board with this new technology. It was a strategic move,
Oh, wow.
By establishing a Bitcoin reserve, the U.S. was saying, hey, we're serious about this whole digital economy thing, and we want to be the ones in charge.
Okay, I get it. So how does this Bitcoin reserve actually work? When we're talking like Fort Knox, but with servers instead of gold bars?
Yeah.
It's less about having like a physical vault and more about having this digital ownership. So the executive order was all about acquiring a huge amount of Bitcoin.
Oh, wow.
And get this, they were thinking about using assets that they seized from crypto criminals.
Oh, wow. So the bad guys are actually helping to fund the U.S. Bitcoin stash.
Yeah, kind of ironic, isn't it?
That's amazing. But who's going to be in charge of all this digital treasure?
Well, the idea was to have the Federal Reserve manage the reserve and make sure everything's safe and stable. And here's the really interesting part. They were even thinking about using Bitcoin for international transactions.
Really?
Potentially to reduce how much they rely on the US dollar in certain situations.
Wait a minute. So the U.S. is saying, hey, maybe you should use something else instead of the dollar. That's kind of weird, isn't it?
Yeah, it's definitely a change in how they usually think. Remember when El Salvador decided to make Bitcoin their official currency?
Yeah, I remember that.
That caused a lot of buzz. It brought in more investment in tourism, but it also made people worry about how much Bitcoin's value goes up and down and how it's not really regulated.
That's true. But what the U.S. is doing is different, right? They're not saying to get rid of the dollar. They're just adding another option.
Exactly. They're being more cautious with this. They see the potential of Bitcoin, but they also know that its value can change a lot and that there are a lot of rules and regulations they need to figure out.
Okay, so this is a pretty interesting situation. You've got the U.S. government and Bitcoin, and then you've got this whole global economic situation that's a little bit unpredictable. So what could happen because of all of this? What are the potential economic and political consequences that we should be thinking about?
So let's start with the economic side of things. This move could potentially make more people want to buy Bitcoin, which would drive up the price.
Makes sense.
And this is where it gets really interesting. It could actually make the US dollar even stronger as the main currency that everyone uses around the world. It's like they're saying, hey, we're not afraid of Bitcoin. In fact, we're going to use it to our advantage.
That's kind of a paradox, isn't it? It's like they're saying, we're not worried about you, Bitcoin. We're going to use you to make ourselves stronger.
Exactly. But that's not all. This whole thing could attract even more investors to the cryptocurrency market.
Wow, so this is like shaking up a snow globe and we're waiting to see where all the snowflakes land.
That's a good way to put it.
What about the political implications?
On the political side of things, this move is a clear message that the US is a major player in the digital economy. It's a power move on a global scale. It could create tension with countries that aren't so sure about crypto.
Oh yeah,
Just imagine the conversations that are happening behind closed doors in those countries.
I bet. And how do you even regulate something like Bitcoin on a global scale? It's not controlled by any one country. It's like trying to herd cats, but the cats are digital and they move at the speed of light.
You got it. It's completely uncharted territory. Figuring out the rules and regulations for this is going to be really important if this whole experiment is going to work.
Okay, so I know this is a lot to take in. It's like drinking from a fire hose of financial information.
Yeah, it's a lot.
But stick with us, because understanding these trends is crucial in today's world.
It's like learning a new language. It might seem hard at first, but once you get the basics, you can understand a whole new world.
So for those of you who are thinking, okay, this is all very interesting, but how does this affect me personally? What are the key takeaways here?
First of all, don't put all your eggs in one basket. Whether you're investing in traditional assets or crypto, you need to diversify. Think of your investment portfolio like a well-balanced meal.
I like that.
A little bit of everything is good for you.
Okay, so spread the risk.
Exactly. And the second thing is stay informed. The crypto world moves so fast, so keep an eye on what's happening with regulations and market trends.
Got it. So knowledge is power and diversification is key. Maybe a little bit of an adventurous spirit wouldn't hurt either, right?
Yeah, maybe, but always be careful. This is still a pretty new and unpredictable market.
This whole situation is both exciting and a little bit scary. What are your thoughts on the future of cryptocurrency?
It's like watching a rocket launch. The US establishing this Bitcoin reserve was a big moment. I think we're going to see even more people and companies start using cryptocurrencies.
Okay.
We're already seeing some big companies adding them to their payment systems. And then there's this whole thing with the central bank digital currencies, or CBDCs.
CBDCs, tell me more about that.
So imagine a digital version of like the dollar or the euro, but it's issued and backed by the government.
So instead of using like a digital wallet from a private company, I'd be using one from the government.
Exactly. And that raises a lot of questions about things like privacy, security, and control.
Wow. It seems like we're on the edge of a whole new era of money. The line between digital and traditional finance is getting really blurry.
It is. It's a super interesting time to be alive, but it's also a time to be cautious and informed.
That's a good point. Any other words of wisdom before we wrap this up?
Just remember that the world of finance is always changing. What seems revolutionary today might be normal tomorrow. The important thing is to stay curious, keep learning, and don't be afraid to adapt to the changes that are happening.
That's great advice. I'm feeling a little more prepared to deal with this digital future, even if it means learning about a whole bunch of new financial concepts.
That's the spirit.
Speaking of complexities, there's one more question I wanted to explore before we move on.
Yeah, it really feels like we've entered this totally new financial frontier, you know?
Right.
There's this gold rush mentality, but the gold is digital this time, and it's like the rules are changing all the time.
Okay, so we've talked about, some of the good things that could happen because of this Bitcoin reserve, but let's get real for a second. What are the risks here?
Right. Well, I mean, nothing's ever a sure thing, right? Especially
Yeah.
when it comes to money and finances. But one of the biggest risks is the volatility.
Oh, yeah.
Bitcoin is famous for how much its price goes up and down. It's like riding a roller coaster blindfolded. You just never know when you're going to get that drop in your stomach.
I can see the headlines now. U.S. Bitcoin reserve loses billions overnight.
Exactly. It would be all over the news.
And then all the late night comedy shows would be making jokes about it.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And remember that Mt. Gox hack back in 2014?
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
Millions of dollars in Bitcoin just disappeared. Can you imagine that happening to a government-held reserve?
That's a scary thought.
Talk about a security nightmare. So yeah, security is a huge concern.
Right. But even with like the best security systems in place, isn't there always the risk of human error?
Absolutely.
Like what if somebody accidentally sends billions of dollars worth of Bitcoin to the wrong address?
That could definitely happen. It's like that saying, a chain is only as strong as its weakest link. And in this case, the weakest link could be just one person making a mistake.
It feels like we're handing over the keys to the kingdom, to something that we don't even fully understand yet. I mean, are we really ready for this?
Yeah, that's the big question, isn't it? We're basically running this huge experiment with the global financial system, and there's a lot at stake.
No doubt about it. So what does all this mean for the average person? Should we be running out to buy Bitcoin right now, or like cashing out our retirement funds?
Whoa, hold on there. I wouldn't recommend making any big decisions based on just this one thing. Remember what we said about diversification?
Oh, yeah.
That's still really important. And do your own research.
Yes.
Don't just follow the hype blindly.
Okay, good advice. It's easy to get caught up in all the excitement, especially when you see the price of Bitcoin going up.
Que comprender los datos financieros no debería ser una tarea pesada. Por eso aprovechamos el poder de la animación y la visualización para dar vida a los números. Imagínense ver cómo un modelo tridimensional de la economía global responde en tiempo real a las noticias de última hora, o presenciar las intrincadas conexiones entre diferentes clases de activos que se desarrollan ante sus ojos a través de cautivadoras visualizaciones de datos. Para proporcionar un contexto adicional y la perspectiva de expertos, invitamos regularmente a economistas, líderes, analistas de mercado y directores ejecutivos de las principales corporaciones a compartir sus conocimientos. Estas entrevistas ofrecen perspectivas invaluables sobre las fuerzas que moldean el mundo financiero.
Sección 6. Análisis profundos y estudios de caso. Descifrando el éxito financiero. Creemos que aprender de las empresas exitosas es clave para la educación financiera. Por eso dedicamos segmentos a estudios de caso en profundidad de empresas que han logrado un crecimiento y una rentabilidad notables. Con mi destreza analítica, disecciono las estrategias empleadas por estas empresas, destacando factores clave como la innovación, la adaptación al mercado y el liderazgo eficaz.
Yeah, just remember that the world of finance never stands still. What seems revolutionary today could be totally normal tomorrow. The key is to stay curious, keep learning, and be open to change.
Great advice. You know, I'm actually feeling a little more confident about facing this digital future, even though it means I have to learn a lot of new stuff about finance.
That's the spirit. It's all about lifelong learning, right?
Right. Okay, so there's one more question I wanted to explore before we move on to our last segment. So we've been talking a lot about the US and this whole Bitcoin reserve thing, but it makes you wonder, what about everyone else? You know, like, are other countries going to want to do the same thing?
Right. Are we going to see like a global crypto arms race?
Yeah, exactly. Like, is everybody going to start scrambling to buy up all the Bitcoin?
It's definitely something that a lot of people are thinking about, you know, especially countries that want to be big players on the world stage. They might feel like they have to follow the US's lead.
It's like peer pressure, but on a global scale.
Yeah, exactly. It could become like a matter of national pride or even like, you know, a way to show that their economy is strong. But it's not just about keeping up with the Joneses either.
Right.
Some countries might see this as a way to protect themselves if the US dollar starts to lose its value.
Oh, so it's like a backup plan for their economy.
Exactly. It's a way to reduce their dependence on the US dollar and maybe avoid some of the negative impacts if something bad happens in the global economy.
Okay, that makes sense. But wouldn't all these countries buying up Bitcoin just make the price go even higher?
It's possible. If there's more demand, the price is probably going to go up. But remember, the price of Bitcoin is affected by a lot of different things.
Right.
It's not just about how many countries are buying it. It's also about how people feel about the market and what kind of regulations are being put in place and even new technologies that are being developed.
So it's really complicated.
Yeah, it is. It's a complex system, and trying to predict exactly what's going to happen is almost impossible.
So looking at the big picture, do you think this is like the beginning of a whole new financial system, or is it just like a temporary trend?
I think it's safe to say that things are changing in a big way. Cryptocurrencies are making people rethink what money really is, and governments are trying to figure out how to adapt to this new reality.
Right.
The US creating a Bitcoin reserve is a huge step in that direction, and the next few years are going to be really interesting to watch as this all plays out.
I agree. It feels like there's a lot of uncertainty, but also a lot of potential for amazing things to happen.
Absolutely. It's like we're exploring uncharted territory, but there could be incredible discoveries waiting for us out there.
So it's important to stay informed and stay curious.
Definitely. This is a story that's still being written, and we all have a role to play in shaping the future of finance.
Well said. Well, folks, that's about it for our deep dive into Bitcoin and national reserves. We've covered a lot of ground today, but remember, this is just the beginning. There's always more to learn about this exciting and constantly evolving world.
And don't forget to check out the show notes for links to more information and resources. We always try to provide you with the best stuff out there.
And let us know what you think. Do you think other countries are going to jump on this Bitcoin bandwagon? What do you see happening in the long run? Join the conversation on our social media channels, and let's keep this discussion going.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We love hearing from you guys.
So until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and remember, the future of finance is in our hands.
That's right. We have the power to shape it.
Thanks for joining us for The Deep Dive. We'll see you next time for another deep dive into a topic that's shaping our world. Bye for now.